The first time he heard the helicopter, he didn't even look up. Sound traveled strange in those woods. It always had. Sometimes it bounced off the ridges and made you think something was closer than it was. Sometimes it disappeared completely, like the trees swallowed it. But this time, the sound didn't fade. It got lower, then rougher, then wrong. He stood still with the axe in his hand, half a log split, his gloves damp from sap. The air had that sharp, metallic smell that sometimes came before storms. His son was behind him somewhere, close enough that he could hear his small boots shifting in the leaves. And then the sound snapped into something else. A violent tearing, a thud that didn't belong in nature. Silence followed so fast it felt like the world had stopped breathing. He didn't move for a few seconds. Then he started running. He ran without thinking about it. Branches slapped his arms. Wet leaves slid under his boots. The axe felt wrong in his hand now, heavy and pointless, but he didn't stop to drop it. His lungs burned fast, like they always did when panic got ahead of reason. Behind him, his son called his name once. Just once. That small voice didn't chase him. It stayed put, like the boy understood something adults usually didn't. That when fear takes a man, he doesn't hear much else. He stopped hard and turned. "Stay there," he said. His voice came out too sharp, not angry, just urgent. The kind of tone you used when you didn't have time to soften anything. The boy froze between two pines, wide-eyed, his small hands half raised like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "I'll come back," he added, slower this time. He watched his son nod, a tight, obedient nod, too grown-up for 6 years old. Then he turned and ran again. The woods opened slightly as he climbed. He knew this stretch. The slope bent upward toward the old ridge where the ground turned rocky and uneven. He'd hunted up there once, years ago, before he stopped doing things that weren't necessary. The air smelled different as he got closer. Not smoke exactly. Something sharper. Burnt plastic. Fuel. He started to hear it before he saw it. A faint crackling, like fire chewing on something wet. He broke through a line of brush and saw the wreck. It wasn't as dramatic as people imagine when they picture a helicopter crash. It didn't look like something from a movie. No clean explosion, no towering flames. It looked wrong, like a machine that had fallen out of the sky and landed in a place it didn't belong. The body of the helicopter was split open against the rocks, twisted like it had been folded by a giant hand. One blade lay snapped in half, buried in the dirt at an angle. The tail was gone entirely, or maybe it was there somewhere farther down the slope. Thin smoke curled from the engine housing. A small fire licked at the edge of torn metal, weak but hungry. He stood still, not because he was frozen, because his mind did what it always did when something bad happened. It started counting. Fire risk, wind direction, time until it spread. How far to the creek? How far to the cabin? How far to help? And then something shifted. A sound, not the crackle of the fire. A noise that didn't belong to metal or trees. A cough, low, wet, human. He didn't think. He moved. He climbed over broken branches and loose stone, careful with his footing, because one bad slip here would end him. And if he went down, no one would come for his boy. No one would even know where to start looking. The cockpit area was crushed. Glass scattered everywhere, glittering in the dirt like ice. He stepped closer, and the smell hit him harder. Fuel and blood. Inside the wreck, something moved. A woman. For a second he only saw her hair dark, tangled, stuck to her face. Then her hand, trembling as it tried to push against a piece of metal that had pinned her shoulder. Her clothes were wrong for this place. Too clean, too fitted. A coat that looked expensive even while torn open at the sleeve. Her face was pale in a way that didn't belong outdoors. Like she belonged under office lights, not under broken trees and smoke. She turned her head slightly, and their eyes met. Her eyes were open wide, not with hysteria, but with the sharp focus of someone trying not to die. She tried to speak. Nothing came out at first. Then, finally, a whisper. "Please." He didn't answer. Not yet. He stepped closer, crouching carefully beside the wreck. Her breathing was shallow. He could hear it, the kind of breathing that sounded like someone fighting to keep their ribs from collapsing inward. Blood stained the front of her shirt, dark and spreading slowly. Not pouring. Seeping. That was worse in a different way. He reached out, then hesitated. The wreck groaned faintly as the fire ate closer. He looked around quickly. The frame was unstable. If the heat got worse, the metal could shift, and whatever was holding her could cut deeper. She swallowed, her throat working hard. "I can't feel my legs," she said, barely audible. That sentence hit him strangely, not because of what it meant, but because of how controlled it sounded. Like she was reporting a fact, not begging, not panicking. He forced himself to speak. "Can you move your arms?" She nodded a fraction. Her left arm was pinned, but her right hand twitched weakly. He looked at what trapped her, a bent piece of interior paneling pressed into her shoulder and side. The metal edge was jagged. If he yanked it the wrong way, it would tear her open. He shifted his axe to his other hand, then realized how insane that looked, like he was about to finish her off. He set it down. His hands hovered over the metal, and he felt the heat radiating through it. Not burning yet, but warm enough to warn him. He didn't have tools. Not here. Not now. He glanced around the wreck. There was debris everywhere. Wires, seat padding, broken equipment. A small emergency kit was strapped to the side of a compartment near the rear. He saw it immediately. Bright red. He crawled toward it carefully, ignoring the way the sharp edges tore at his sleeves. He yanked at the strap until it gave. The kit hit the ground with a dull thud. He tore it open. Bandages. Gauze. A cheap flashlight. A flare. A small folding knife. Gloves. He grabbed the gloves first. His fingers were already shaking, and he hated that. He didn't like shaking. It meant he wasn't in control. He pulled the gloves on, then crawled back toward her. She was watching him the whole time. Even through pain, she didn't stop tracking his movements. "Don't move," he told her. Her lips parted slightly. "I can't," she said. He nodded, more to himself than to her. He pressed his hands against the metal piece pinning her and tried to lift it. It didn't budge. He shifted his grip, braced his foot against the ground, and pulled harder. The wreck creaked. The metal shifted half an inch. She gasped sharply, her head jerking back. Blood moved again, fresh and brighter. He stopped immediately. His jaw tightened. "Where does it hurt?" he asked. Her breath came in thin pieces. "All of it," she said, then swallowed hard. "My side, my shoulder, my chest." He stared at her for a second, not in confusion, in frustration, because there wasn't time for careful. The fire behind them crackled louder now, creeping toward the cabin area of the wreck. He could see a faint orange glow spreading along the interior. He looked at her legs. One was pinned under a crushed panel. Her boot was still on. That was good. That meant the bone might not be exposed. Might. He reached down, gently testing the pressure point. She hissed through her teeth. Her fingers curled into a fist. He didn't apologize. He didn't say soothing words. He wasn't that kind of man. He never had been. But he did lower his hand slowly, as if moving too fast would make her break. "You're stuck," he said. Her eyes stayed locked on his. "I know," she whispered. He looked up at the smoke, then at the trees. Then, for the first time, he thought of his son standing alone between the pines. That thought hit him like a punch. He had told him to stay, and the boy would stay. Too obedient, too trusting. His chest tightened. He stood up abruptly and looked back down at the woman. "I have a kid," he said. Her brows pulled together slightly, but she wasn't sure what he meant. "I left him nearby. I need to get him first." Her face changed. Not fear for herself. Something else. A flash of guilt almost. "You can't leave me here," she said. It wasn't a demand. It was quiet. Barely a voice. He stared at her, feeling anger rise, not at her, but at the whole situation. He didn't want this choice. He didn't want to decide between a stranger bleeding and twisted metal and his child standing alone in the woods. But the decision was already there, sitting in his hands like weight. He turned away. He didn't run back the way he came. He moved fast, but carefully, because if he broke his ankle here, it was over for all of them. He reached the clearing where he'd left his son, and his heart stuttered. The boy was still there, exactly where he'd been told to stand. Small, quiet, watching the trees like they were alive. When he saw his father, his shoulders loosened slightly, like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. "Dad," the boy said. He grabbed him by the arm, not hard, but firm, and pulled him close. "Listen," he said. "There's been an accident." The boy's eyes flicked past him, toward the ridge. What was that sound? A helicopter crashed. The boy's mouth fell open a little. He looked afraid now, properly afraid. "There's someone hurt," the man added. "A woman." The boy blinked rapidly, trying to process it. "Is she dead?" "No." That answer came too quick, too certain, like he was trying to convince himself. The boy's voice dropped. "Are we going to help her?" He looked down at his son. Really looked. There was dirt on his cheek, a smear of sap on his sleeve. His hair was messy under his cap. Too small to be standing in the woods with this kind of question hanging between them. He felt something twist inside him, a tired kind of rage. "Yes," he said. Then he took off his jacket. The boy stared. "What are you doing?" He wrapped the jacket around the boy's shoulders and pulled it tight. "You're going back to the cabin," he said. "Right now." The boy's face tightened. "No, I want to come." "You're not coming." The boy's eyes filled quickly, not with tears yet, but with the threat of them. "She might die," the boy whispered. The man swallowed. "I know." He crouched down until they were eye level. His voice softened without him meaning to. "You know the path back." The boy nodded. "You run. You don't stop. You don't go looking at anything. You get inside, you lock the door, and you wait." The boy shook his head slightly. "What if you don't come back?" That question landed heavy. It was the kind of question a child should never have learned to ask. He held his son's face between his hands. "I will," he said. He didn't say it like a promise. He said it like a fact he had to make true. The boy's lips trembled. Then he nodded, once. And he turned and ran. The man watched her disappear into the trees, watched until the sound of his footsteps faded. Only then did he turn back toward the wreck. He moved faster now. No hesitation left. When he reached the helicopter again, the smoke was thicker. The fire had grown. Still not roaring, but enough that the air was hot near the frame. The woman was still awake. Barely. Her eyes flicked toward him, and something in her expression loosened, like she'd been holding herself together by force. "You came back," she whispered. He didn't answer. He dropped to his knees beside her again and grabbed the folding knife from the kit. He started cutting through a strap tangled around her waist. Her breath caught. "Wait," she said. His hands paused. "What?" Her voice was weaker now. "My bag." He stared at her. "What bag?" She swallowed, struggling to lift her chin. "There's a black case in the back." He looked past her into the wreck. There was debris everywhere. "You're dying," he said flatly. "I'm not looking for a bag." Her eyes sharpened despite the pain. "It's important," she whispered. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Nothing is more important than you getting out of here." For a second she looked like she might argue. Then her eyelids fluttered. Her head fell slightly to the side. He saw it then, the fear underneath her control, not fear of pain, fear of being left. He reached under the bent panel again, this time bracing his shoulder against the wreck to leverage his weight. He pulled hard, using everything in his back and arms. The metal groaned louder. He felt it give. Not much, but enough. He didn't stop. He pulled again, teeth clenched. the muscles in his neck straining. The panel shifted upward suddenly, scraping against her coat. She cried out, a sound she couldn't hold back anymore. Blood smeared along the edge of the metal. His stomach turned. He forced himself to keep going. He shoved a broken piece of wood under the lifted panel, wedging it to hold the space open. Then he reached for her legs. Carefully, he started pulling the crushed panel off her boot. Her breathing turned ragged. "Stop," she whispered. But it didn't sound like she meant it. It sounded like instinct. He didn't stop. He freed one leg, then the other. Her body sagged as the pressure released, and she let out a shaking breath that sounded almost like relief, but she still wasn't free. Her shoulder was still pinned, and the fire was closer now. He could hear the fuel popping. His eyes flicked to the emergency flare in the kit. A thought crossed his mind signal. Someone, get help. But there was no one out here. No roads, no houses, just his cabin and miles of forest. He leaned down again and put his hands under her arms. "This is going to hurt," he said. Her eyes met his. She didn't nod. She didn't speak. But her fingers gripped his sleeve with what strength she had left, and that was enough. He pulled. The metal caught her coat and tore it open further. Something scraped across her shoulder. She screamed, short and sharp, then bit down hard on her own lip, blood blooming there instantly. He didn't let go. He pulled again. And suddenly she slid free. Her body collapsed against him, limp and heavy. For a second, he just held her, breathing hard, feeling the heat from the wreck against his back. Then the fire surged. A louder crack. A burst of flame. His instincts snapped into place. He lifted her fully, awkwardly, like carrying a body that wasn't cooperating, and staggered backward away from the wreck. Her head rolled against his chest. Her hair smelled like smoke and something clean underneath, like expensive shampoo that didn't belong in the dirt. He carried her until he was far enough that the heat eased. Then he lowered her carefully onto the ground. She gasped weakly, eyes half open. He tore open the gauze and pressed it against the wound at her side. Blood soaked through immediately. He cursed under his breath. He pressed harder. Her hand moved weakly toward his wrist. "Don't," she whispered. He ignored it. He wasn't gentle. Not because he didn't care. Because he did. Too much. Gentleness didn't stop bleeding. Her eyes squeezed shut. Her face tightened in pain, but she didn't scream again. She just lay there, shaking. He looked at her face, then at the blood. Then he looked back at the burning helicopter. The wreck crackled and groaned like it was alive. He felt the weight of what he'd done settle in his chest. This wasn't a quick rescue. This wasn't help someone and go home. This was going to follow him. He already knew it. He tied the bandage tight around her torso, using the emergency kit tape, then checked her pulse quickly at her neck. It was there. Fast. Weak. He exhaled slowly through his nose. "You're going to stay awake," he said. Her eyelids fluttered. "I can't." "Yes," he said, firmer. "You can." "Yes," he said, firmer. "You can." Her lips parted. Her voice came out like sandpaper. "Who are you?" He didn't answer right away. He stared at her for a second, then looked down at his hands, red and shaking. "Doesn't matter," he said. Then he lifted her again. The moment her weight settled into his arms, he realized how far the cabin really was, how steep the slope was, how alone they were, and how his son would be waiting at home, locked inside, listening for footsteps. He started walking anyway, because now there wasn't a choice left. He didn't carry her like a hero. He carried her like a problem he couldn't put down. Her body was heavier than he expected, not because she was large, but because she wasn't helping at all. Limp weight. Dead weight. Every step forced his arms to adjust, his grip to tighten. Her head kept slipping against his chest, and he kept having to shift her higher, his forearm digging into her back. The slope down from the crash site was worse on the way back. Rocks rolled under his boots. Wet moss hid slick patches. Twice his knee buckled, and he caught himself at the last second, the muscles in his thigh burning. Each time she made a small sound, not words, just pain leaking out. He didn't speak to her. He didn't reassure her. He didn't know how. He just kept moving. The air grew colder as the sun dipped behind the ridge. The light changed, turning everything darker too quickly. In those woods, dusk didn't arrive gently. It dropped. He felt it in his bones. Winter wasn't fully gone yet. The snow had melted in the lower areas, but up here the cold still lived in the ground. Her blood had soaked through the gauze already. It was warm against his shirt. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Not the mess, the warmth. It felt wrong, like holding something that should still be inside her. She stirred once, her eyelids fluttering. "Don't drop me," she whispered. He didn't look down. "I won't," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. Quiet, immediate. He hated that. Not because it was false, because it made it real. Like he'd agreed to something. She went still again, but her breathing stayed uneven, shallow and rattling. He pushed through thicker brush, ducking under low branches. Her hair caught on twigs, and he had to pause to free it. Each pause felt like time stolen from her. He kept thinking about the fire, not the danger to himself, the sound of it growing, the way it had surged as he walked away. He knew what fuel could do. If the tank went, the whole ridge could burn. And if that happened, the cabin would go too. His son, the thought sharpened his steps. When he finally reached the familiar path, the narrow line of flattened leaves that led back toward home, his shoulders were shaking. Not from fear, from strain. The kind that came when your body had been screaming for a long time and you refused to listen. He could see the first margar tree, the one with the old cut in its bark. He'd done it years ago, a habit from a time when he still believed he might get lost. He hadn't, not once. He adjusted her again. Her coat was torn open now, exposing the pale skin of her collarbone and the darkening bruise spreading across her chest. He tried not to look too long. Her face looked worse. Sweat on her forehead, lips turning slightly bluish, eyes half open but unfocused. Shock. He'd seen it before. Not in the woods. Somewhere else. Somewhere he didn't like remembering. He tightened his grip and moved faster. The cabin came into view as the last of the light bled out between the trees. Small. Wooden. Smoke curling from the chimney. The door was shut. The windows were dark. For a second his stomach dropped, a cold panic hitting him so hard he nearly stopped walking. Then he heard it, the small thump inside. Footsteps. Then the sound of a bolt sliding. The door opened a crack. His son's face appeared, pale in the dimness. "Dad." The boy stopped when he saw what was in his father's arms. His eyes widened. He didn't move. The man pushed the door open with his shoulder. "Move," he said, sharper than he meant to. The boy stumbled backward, pressing himself against the wall like he didn't know where to go. The man carried the woman inside and laid her down on the table. It wasn't a medical table. It was their dinner table. It still had a folded cloth on it and a wooden bowl with a few dried apples. He shoved everything aside with one arm. The woman made a small choking sound when her back hit the wood. Her eyes flew open. "Wait." He ignored her and reached for the lamp. His hands fumbled with the match. He struck it once. It snapped out. He struck again. Flame caught. Light filled the room in a weak, trembling circle. The woman's face looked worse in the lamplight. Blood streaked her cheek. Dirt smeared across her jaw. Her lip was split. She didn't look like someone who belonged here. She looked like someone who'd fallen into the wrong world. His son stood near the doorway, still frozen. The man glanced at him. "Get the water," he said. The boy didn't move right away. His eyes were locked on the woman. "Now," the man repeated. That snapped him loose. The boy ran to the counter and grabbed the kettle, his small hand shaking. He poured water into a pot and set it down, looking back over his shoulder every few seconds like he expected her to disappear. The man leaned over the woman. "Can you hear me?" he asked. Her eyes focused slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "Name." She hesitated. He saw it. The hesitation wasn't confusion. It was calculation. He felt irritation rise. You don't have time to play games, he said. Her throat moved as she swallowed. Claire, she said. The name sounded clean, like it belonged on a business card. He nodded once, not because he believed her, but because it didn't matter. He pulled the emergency kit closer and started cutting away the rest of her coat. She flinched. Stop, she said, voice strained. That's expensive. He paused, staring at her. For a moment he thought he'd misheard. Then he let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. You're bleeding through your ribs, he said. I don't care what it costs. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue again. He peeled the fabric back carefully and his stomach turned. The wound on her side wasn't a clean cut. It was torn, jagged. The skin around it was bruised and swelling. He'd wrapped it tight, but it wasn't enough. Blood still seeped, slow but steady. His son came closer, holding a rag and a bowl of water, his eyes wide and glossy. Is she going to die? The boy whispered. The woman's eyes shifted toward the child. Something changed in her expression. Not warmth, not kindness, but something like surprise, like she hadn't expected a child to exist in this house, like she hadn't expected anything here to be real. The man didn't answer the boy right away. He focused on the wound. He cleaned it the best he could, using the rag. The water turned pink almost immediately. He kept wiping anyway. The woman hissed, her fingers curling against the table. He noticed her nails. Manicured. Perfect. Even now. That detail bothered him more than it should have. It made her seem untouched by real life, like she'd lived in a world where hands didn't get dirty. He pressed gauze against the wound again and wrapped it tighter. Then he looked at her shoulder. Bruising there, too. Possibly dislocated, possibly broken. He touched it lightly. She gasped, her face twisting. Don't, she said, sharper now. He pulled back slightly. You want to live? He asked. Her eyes flashed. Yes. Then let me work. She stared at him for a long moment. The kind of stare people used when they were used to being listened to. Used to being obeyed. Then her gaze drifted and her eyelids fluttered. Her body sagged. He caught her shoulder before her head hit the table. Claire, he said, firm. Stay awake. She blinked slowly. I'm tired. I know. The words came out quieter than he expected. His son stood beside him now, too close. The man turned to him. Go to your room, he said. The boy shook his head. I want to help. You can't. I can. The man's voice cut through the room like a blade. Go. The boy's face crumpled slightly, but he didn't cry. He just nodded stiffly and walked away down the small hall. The man watched him go, his jaw tight. Then he turned back to the woman. The room felt different without the child's presence. Smaller, colder. Claire's eyes were half open. She whispered, He's your son? Yes. She swallowed. You live here alone? He didn't answer. He didn't like questions, but her voice was weak now, not commanding, not sharp, just quiet. And there was something in the way she asked, like she was trying to understand what kind of man would run into burning wreckage for a stranger. He tightened the bandage and stood up. I need to check the radio, he said. Her eyes moved toward him. There's reception? She asked. He didn't reply. He crossed the room and pulled the old radio unit down from the shelf. It was battered, patched, and half unreliable. He turned it on. Static. He adjusted the dial. Static. He tried again. Nothing. He slammed his palm lightly against the side, then listened. A faint crackle. Still nothing useful. No voice. No signal. He stared at it, feeling anger crawl up his spine. Not at the radio, at the fact that help wasn't coming. Not unless he went for it. And going for it meant leaving his son alone with a bleeding stranger. Claire shifted on the table, her breathing uneven. Is anyone coming? She asked. He looked at her. No. The word sat heavy in the air. Her face tightened, and for the first time she looked frightened in a way she couldn't hide. Not panic, not hysteria, just a quiet understanding of what it meant to be stuck here. She swallowed hard. "My phone," she said. He reached into her coat pocket and pulled it out. The screen was shattered. "Dead." He set it down. "Won't work." She stared at it like she'd expected it to save her. Then she closed her eyes. He watched her for a second, and something in his chest tightened. She wasn't just injured. She was realizing she had no control here. No resources. No assistance. No security. No way to make a call and have someone solve it. Just pain. Just cold. Just him. He went to the cabinet and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Not good whiskey. The kind he kept for winter nights when the silence got too loud. He poured a small amount into a cup and brought it to her. "Drink," he said. She opened her eyes and stared at it. "I don't drink." He almost laughed again. "You do now." She hesitated. Her hand trembled as she reached for the cup. She took a sip. Her face twisted, and she coughed, the sound tearing through her ribs. He caught the cup before it spilled. "That's enough," he said. He set it down. Her breathing steadied slightly. Not better. Just less frantic. He stepped back and looked around the cabin. The room was clean, but worn. Wooden floors scuffed, walls lined with shelves of canned food, tools, and old photographs. A small child's drawing was pinned near the stove. A stick figure family. 2 figures holding hands, one with a small head and a big smile. The other, taller figure had a straight line for a mouth. Claire's eyes drifted in the same direction. She stared at the drawing longer than she should have. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "He drew that?" "Yes." Her gaze shifted back to him. "You're a single father." He didn't respond. He hated that label. Single father. Widower. Survivor. People always wanted a neat word for a life that wasn't neat. He walked to the window and looked outside. The sky was dark now, and somewhere out there, beyond the trees, the helicopter was still burning. He could smell it faintly. He knew what would happen by morning. Someone would notice it missing. Someone would search, but that was assuming anyone cared fast enough. He turned back. Claire was watching him again, her eyes sharper now, even through exhaustion. "What were you doing out there?" she asked. "Cutting wood." She blinked. "No," she said slowly. "Before that. Before this." "What is this place?" He stared at her. Then he answered, because he didn't know why. Because the truth was simple. It's home. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else, but she stopped. Her gaze dropped to the bandage around her torso. Then her face tightened, and she gripped the edge of the table. Pain surged through her again. He stepped forward instinctively. "What is it?" he asked. She shook her head, jaw clenched. Then she whispered, "I can't breathe right." That sentence landed wrong. He leaned down, listening. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. A faint wheeze. He felt his stomach turn cold. A punctured lung. Or internal bleeding. He'd seen it once. A man coughing pink foam into the dirt, eyes wide with the realization that air wasn't staying where it belonged. He stood up too fast. He walked to the shelf and grabbed his old medical book, the one he bought years ago when he first moved out here, when he still believed he could prepare for everything. His hands flipped pages quickly. Chest trauma. Shock. Signs of collapse. He read, then looked back at her. Claire's face was damp with sweat. Her skin had turned a strange grayish tone. She looked smaller now, less like a powerful stranger, more like someone breakable. He put the book down. He walked to the hall and knocked on his son's door. "Ellie," he said. The boy's voice came small through the wood. "Yes?" "Get your shoes on." A pause. "Why?" He hesitated, because he didn't want to say it out loud, because saying it would mean he'd already decided. "We're going to town," he said. His son opened the door immediately, eyes wide, face pale. "In the dark?" "Yes." The boy glanced toward the main room, toward the table. Is she coming? The man looked back at Claire. She was staring at the ceiling now, breathing like each inhale cost her something. He nodded once. Yes. The boy's face tightened, but he didn't argue. He ran to grab his boots. The man turned back toward Claire. She heard him moving. She opened her eyes. You're leaving, she whispered. He stepped closer. No, he said. I'm taking you out of here. Her eyes filled with something like disbelief. You can't, she said weakly. I can't walk. I know. He reached down and slid his arms under her again. Her body tensed. She gritted her teeth, trying not to cry out as he lifted her. Her breath came out in a thin, broken sound. He held her tighter. You're going to make it, he said. Not softly, not kindly. Like he was ordering her body to obey. She stared at him, and something in her expression shifted. Not gratitude. Not yet. Something closer to surrender. His son appeared in the doorway. Boots half-laced, coat too big, hair messy. He looked at Claire with fear and curiosity mixed together. Claire's gaze moved to him. For the first time, she spoke directly to the child. What's your name? She asked. The boy hesitated. Then, quietly, Ellie. Claire nodded faintly. Ely, she repeated, like she was testing the sound of it. Then her eyes closed again. The man carried her to the door. The night air hit them hard, cold and sharp. He stepped out into the dark with her weight in his arms, his son following close behind. He locked the cabin door out of habit, even though it felt pointless. Then he started down the path. The forest swallowed them almost immediately. No lights, no sound except their breathing and the crunch of leaves underfoot. The man felt the woman's blood soaking into his shirt again. He felt his son's small footsteps behind him. And he realized, with a dull heaviness in his chest, that this night was going to change everything. Not in a clean way. Not in a way anyone could plan. Just, permanently, the forest at night was not the same place. During the day it had shape, paths, landmarks, color. At night it became depth and shadow and guesswork. The beam from his flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through it, but everything beyond that circle felt close. Listening. He adjusted Claire in his arms again. Her breathing had changed. Shorter now, each inhale catching halfway, like something inside her refused to expand. Eli stayed close. Too close. Back a little, he said without turning. The boy fell half a step behind, but didn't argue. The road was 3 miles out. Maybe a little less if he cut across the lower ridge. He didn't cut across the lower ridge at night. Too many roots, too many hidden dips. Tonight he did. Claire stirred once, her hand weakly gripping the fabric at his shoulder. Cold, she murmured. He felt it too. The temperature dropped fast after sunset. The air slid under clothing and stayed there. Almost there, he said. It wasn't true, not even close. But he needed her body to keep trying. The ground sloped unevenly. He nearly tripped twice. The second time he did fall one knee hitting hard against a buried rock. Pain shot up his leg, sharp and bright. He absorbed it, didn't let it out. Eli gasped behind him. I'm fine, he said. He wasn't sure if he meant it. Claire's head rolled against his arm. Her lips parted slightly. He couldn't tell if she was conscious anymore. He stopped for a second and shifted her higher, adjusting the bandage with one hand. His fingers came away wet again. Too much, he swallowed. He couldn't carry her the whole way like this. He moved to the base of a thick pine and carefully lowered her against the trunk. Eli stepped forward immediately. Is she worse? The boy whispered. Yes, he said, because lying felt like wasted energy. Claire's eyes flickered open. Don't leave me, she said, barely audible. I'm not. He crouched in front of her. The flashlight lay sideways on the ground, casting uneven light across her face. She looked different in the dark. Smaller, stripped of whatever authority she carried in daylight. Her gaze found his. You should have left me there, she breathed. He didn't react at first. Then he shook his head once. No. A faint frown touched her brow. Why? He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a reason he could say without sounding like he was trying to be good. He wasn't trying to be good. He was trying to live with himself tomorrow. He stood and looked around. We need something to carry her, he muttered. Eli stared. Like what? He scanned the trees. Branches, straight ones, thick enough to hold weight. He set the flashlight upright between two rocks and walked a few feet into the brush, snapping two long, sturdy limbs free. He worked fast, cutting off smaller branches with his pocket knife. He dragged them back and pulled off his belt. Eli understood without being told. He shrugged out of his coat and handed it over. They tied the coat between the two branches, rough but functional. A stretcher. Not good, but enough. He knelt again and slid his arms under Claire carefully. Her body felt hotter now, fever rising. When he lifted her this time, she cried out louder. The sound cut through the trees in a way that made him freeze for half a second. It felt too loud, too vulnerable. He laid her gently onto the makeshift stretcher. Her hand shot out weakly and caught his sleeve. Her eyes opened. You're not strong enough, she whispered. He stared at her. I don't need to be. She almost smiled. Almost. Then her eyes closed again. He picked up the front of the stretcher. Eli took the back. It was awkward. The branches flexed under her weight. They had to move slowly to keep her balanced. Step. Pause. Adjust. Step. The rhythm became mechanical. Eli's breathing grew louder after 10 minutes, then heavier. The boy's arms trembled, but he didn't complain. The man felt that in his chest. Switch, he said quietly. They rotated positions without speaking further. Claire groaned once as the stretcher tilted slightly. Sorry, Eli whispered to her. She didn't respond. They moved through a patch of low fog near the bottom ridge. It clung to the ground and blurred the beam of the flashlight. For a moment the world felt smaller than the space between them. The man's thoughts narrowed. Left foot. Right foot. Don't trip. Don't drop her. Don't let the boy see you struggle. He kept listening for the road, for the faint hum of passing trucks. Nothing, just wind brushing the tops of trees. After what felt like an hour but was probably less, Ellie stumbled. The stretcher dipped hard on one side. Claire's body rolled slightly. A broken sound escaped her throat. The man dropped to one knee instantly, steadying the branches. Eli's hands were shaking violently now. I'm sorry, the boy said quickly. I'm trying. He looked at his son's face in the flashlight beam. Pale. Jaw clenched. Tears balanced in his eyes but not falling. He set the stretcher down. Sit, he said. Eli shook his head. I can do it. I know you can, he replied. Sit anyway. The boy sank onto a rock, breathing hard. The man crouched in front of him. You don't get extra points for collapsing, he said quietly. Eli sniffed once. She's going to die if we stop. The words were sharp. Too sharp. The man let them hang there. Then he said, she's going to die if we rush and drop her too. Eli nodded slowly. Claire shifted faintly behind them. The man stood and went back to her. He touched her forehead. Hot. He pressed his fingers lightly to her neck. Pulse still there. He leaned closer. Claire, he said. Her eyelids twitched. Stay with me. Her lips moved. Bag, she whispered again. Even now. He exhaled through his nose. You're not thinking straight. Her brow furrowed weakly. You don't understand. He believed that, but he also didn't care about any bag. He straightened and looked toward the dark stretch ahead. He could almost picture the road now. Gravel, faint reflective markers, a sign half bent from winter storms. Almost there. He helped Eli stand. They lifted the stretcher again. The last stretch felt longer than all of it combined. Claire's breathing grew worse. A faint wheezing sound accompanied each inhale now. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew they were running out of time. Finally, the trees thinned. The beam of the flashlight caught gravel. The road. He felt something in his chest loosen just slightly. Not relief. Not yet. He lowered the stretcher at the edge and listened. Silence. He looked left. Nothing. Right. Nothing. The road at night out here wasn't busy. It could take 15 minutes, maybe more. He couldn't wait 15 minutes. He set the flashlight upright again and stepped into the middle of the road. He told Eli, "Stay with her." The boy nodded and knelt beside Claire. The man walked into the dark and listened hard. Then, faintly, he heard it. An engine. Far off. But coming. He stepped farther into the road. The sound grew. Headlights appeared around the curve. Too fast. He waved both arms high. The truck didn't slow. He stepped closer to the center line. The headlights bore down on him. At the last second, the brakes screamed. The truck swerved slightly and stopped only a few yards away. The driver's door flew open. "What the hell are you doing?" a voice shouted. The man didn't waste time explaining. "I need help," he said. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s, looked past him toward the trees. "What's going on?" "There was a crash," he said. "Helicopter. She's injured." The driver's expression changed instantly. "Where?" he pointed. They moved together toward the stretcher. The driver's mouth fell open slightly when he saw her. "Jesus! She can't breathe right," the man said. The driver knelt and checked her quickly. "We need to move," he said. They lifted her into the back seat of the truck carefully. Eli climbed in beside her without being asked. The man shut the door and climbed into the passenger seat. The truck roared back onto the road. Inside the cab, it smelled like oil and stale coffee. The driver pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. The man stared straight ahead. He could see Claire's reflection faintly in the side mirror. Her head leaned against Eli's shoulder. The boy held her hand. He didn't speak. The sirens met them halfway down the road. Red and blue lights cut through the trees, unnatural and harsh. The truck slowed. Paramedics rushed forward, voices sharp and efficient. They pulled Claire from the back seat and onto a stretcher. One of them looked at the man. "You family?" he asked. He hesitated. "No." The word felt strange. They worked quickly oxygen mask, questions, checking vitals. "Name?" one paramedic asked Claire loudly. She didn't answer. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered. "Claire," she whispered. "Last name?" A pause. Then silence. The paramedic looked at the man. He shook his head. "I don't know." They loaded her into the ambulance. Ely stood near the rear tire, small and still. The man walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. The ambulance doors shut. The siren flared again. And just like that, she was gone. The red lights faded down the road. The night closed back in around them. The truck driver stood nearby watching. "You coming?" the driver asked. He looked at Eli. The boy's face was pale but steady. "Yes," he said. They climbed back into the truck. As it pulled away, the man stared out the window toward the direction of the hospital. He felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not pride, not fear. A thread. Thin. Unwanted. But there. He didn't know her. He didn't want to know her. He didn't want to know her. But she was no longer just a stranger in the woods. She had breathed against his shoulder. She had said his son's name, and that was enough to make this complicated. Hospitals at night felt suspended. Not quiet exactly. Machines hummed. Shoes squeaked against tile. Phones rang somewhere behind closed doors, but the air carried a strange stillness, like everything was waiting for something to tip. He sat in a plastic chair that was too small for him. Ely leaned against his side, half asleep, his head resting against his arm. The boy had refused to lie down, refused to close his eyes fully. Every time footsteps passed, he looked up. They had taken Claire through double doors 20 minutes ago, maybe more. Time inside those walls moved differently. A nurse had asked questions. He had answered what he could. Where did it happen? In the forest. Exact location. He described the ridge as best he could. Her last name? I don't know. Relation to you? None. The nurse had looked at him for a second when he said that. Not accusing, just measuring. He didn't explain further. Eli's fingers were curled tightly in the fabric of his sleeve. "Dad," the boy whispered without lifting his head. "Yeah. Is she going to be mad?" He frowned slightly. Mad. That we moved her. That we cut her coat. The man exhaled slowly. "I don't think that's what she's worried about." Eli was quiet for a while after that. Across the room, a television mounted high in the corner played muted news. The screen showed traffic footage, a weather map, something about markets. He didn't pay attention. He kept replaying the sound of her breathing. That uneven, fragile rhythm. He had heard it before. He closed his eyes briefly and saw another face. Pale, lips turning blue. He opened his eyes again immediately. Footsteps approached. A doctor in blue scrubs stopped in front of them. "You brought her in?" the doctor asked. He nodded and stood up slowly so Eli wouldn't fall. "She's stable for now," the doctor said. For now. The phrase slid in quietly but stayed. "She had a punctured lung and significant blood loss. We've inserted a chest tube and stabilized the bleeding. She'll need surgery for her shoulder. It's dislocated and fractured." He absorbed the words without reacting. "She'll make it?" he asked. The doctor paused just long enough to be honest. "Yes," he said, "if there are no complications." If. He nodded once. "Can we see her?" Eli asked suddenly. The doctor looked down at the boy, surprised. "Are you family?" Eli glanced at his father. He answered for him. "No." The doctor hesitated. "She's unconscious," he said, but briefly, 5 minutes. They followed him down a hallway that smelled sharply of antiseptic. Claire looked smaller in the hospital bed. Tubes ran from her body in quiet lines. A clear mask covered her nose and mouth. Her skin had regained some color, but not much. Machines beeped steadily beside her. Eli stayed near the door at first. The man stepped closer. He looked at her face, now cleaned of dirt and blood. Without the smoke and chaos around her, she looked younger, less severe. Her hair had been brushed away from her face. Her lip had been stitched. She didn't look powerful. She looked human. Eli edged forward slowly. "Hi," the boy whispered. The man almost told him not to speak, but he didn't. Eli stood beside the bed and studied her carefully. "She looks different," he murmured. "Yeah." The boy hesitated. "Do you think she remembers us?" He didn't know. He didn't answer. Claire's eyelids flickered slightly. The man froze. Her eyes opened halfway. Clouded, disoriented, they moved slowly around the room. Then they landed on him. Recognition came gradually. Her brow tightened faintly. He stepped closer. "You're in the hospital," he said. Her lips moved under the mask. He leaned down slightly. "What?" he asked. Her voice came faint through the oxygen. "Bag." He stared at her. "Even now, you need to stop thinking about that," he said quietly. Her eyes sharpened a fraction despite the haze. "It matters," she whispered. He straightened. "You're alive," he replied. "That's what matters." Her gaze drifted to Eli. The boy stood very still. For a moment, something unguarded passed through her expression. It was quick, soft, almost gone before it formed. Then the nurse stepped in. "That's enough," she said gently. They stepped back. As they turned to leave, Claire's hand shifted slightly against the sheet, like she wanted to reach out but didn't have the strength. He noticed. He didn't react. They walked back into the hallway. Eli looked up at him. "She's stubborn," the boy said. A faint breath escaped him. Not quite a laugh. "Yeah." They returned to the waiting area. Paperwork followed. Statements. Contact information. He gave his name, his number, his address. When asked again about her identity, he repeated what he knew. "Claire," he said. That's it. The nurse frowned slightly. No last name? He shook his head. She made a note. We'll notify authorities about the crash, she said. He nodded. He knew what that meant. Questions, reporters maybe, insurance, government. Helicopters didn't just fall without someone important noticing. The thought sat uneasily. After another half hour, exhaustion settled into his bones. Eli's head drooped heavily against his side now. We're going home, he said quietly. The boy nodded, too tired to argue. Outside, the night air felt different near town, less pure, thicker. The truck driver had long since left. They walked toward the small parking lot, where an old county deputy waited beside his cruiser. You the one from the forest? The deputy asked. Yes. We'll need to talk tomorrow. About the crash site. He nodded. Search and rescue's heading up at first light. He nodded again. The deputy studied him briefly. You did the right thing, he said. The words didn't land the way people expected them to. They felt heavy, like something that would need to be carried. He didn't respond. They drove home in silence. The cabin looked the same as they'd left it, still unaware. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The table was cleared now. Only faint stains remained where blood had soaked into the wood. Ellie walked over and touched the edge of it gently. Will she come back? The boy asked. He took off his coat slowly. I don't know. Eli nodded once, like he expected that answer. Later, after Eli had finally fallen asleep, he sat alone at the table. The cabin was quiet again. The forest outside felt unchanged. But something had shifted. He stared at the faint marks on the wood. He could still feel the weight of her in his arms, still hear the way she'd said his son's name. He didn't like the feeling in his chest. It wasn't attachment. It wasn't responsibility. It was awareness of her world colliding with his, of consequences that hadn't arrived yet. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He told himself this would end at the hospital, that she would recover, that someone from her life would collect her, that she would go back to wherever people like her lived, and he would stay here with his son, with the trees, with a life that didn't involve helicopters. He sat there a long time. At some point, he realized something small but steady had settled inside him. Not hope, not fear, expectation. Like a storm you couldn't see yet but knew was forming somewhere beyond the ridge. He didn't know her last name, but he knew she wasn't just a woman who crashed in the woods. The way she carried herself, even bleeding, had said that. The way she hesitated before giving her name. The way she kept asking about that bag. She belonged to something larger, and larger things didn't disappear quietly. He opened his eyes and looked toward Eli's closed bedroom door. The boy slept deeply now, unaware. He stood and walked to the window. In the distance, faint smoke still drifted from the direction of the ridge. The crash site. He knew by morning it would be full of people. Officials, search teams, questions. His private world would no longer feel private. He rested his hand against the glass, cold. For years, he had chosen isolation carefully, not out of bitterness, out of protection, out of control. Tonight had broken that line. He had stepped into something without knowing its size. And the part that unsettled him most wasn't the danger. It was the memory of her eyes when she looked at Eli, that brief shift. Like something inside her had moved. He didn't trust that. Change always came with a cost. He turned away from the window and blew out the lamp. The cabin went dark. He stood there a moment longer, listening to the forest breathe. Then he went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw two things. The helicopter falling, and Claire's hand twitching slightly against the hospital sheet, like she had wanted to reach for something she wasn't used to needing. The trucks started arriving before sunrise. He heard them before he saw them. Engines climbing the ridge road, doors slamming, voices that didn't belong to the forest. He was already awake. He had been awake most of the night, drifting in and out of something that wasn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt motion falling, carrying, running. His body hadn't realized it was over. Ellie was still asleep when he stepped outside. Cold air. Thin light. The smoke from the crash site had faded to a gray stain against the trees. Two county vehicles were parked near the lower trail. A larger black SUV sat behind them, cleaner than anything else on that dirt road. He noticed that. The men climbing out of it weren't dressed like search and rescue. No reflective jackets, no muddy boots. They wore dark coats, polished shoes that would regret the terrain. He stood still and watched. One of them looked up and spotted him. There was a brief pause like recognition had just clicked into place. The man walked toward him. Mid-40s. Clean haircut. Expression tight but controlled. "You're the one who brought her out," he said. Not a question. Yes. The man extended a hand. He didn't take it immediately. After a second, he did. "Daniel Reeves," the man said. "I'm with North Star Holdings." The name meant nothing to him. He released the handshake. "She's stable," he said. Daniel nodded once. "We've been informed." The way he said it, carefully measured, told him something. "Who is she?" he asked. Daniel held his gaze. "Claire Whitmore." The last name landed heavier than expected. It sounded familiar, but not in a personal way. In a distant way. Like something you saw in headlines without paying attention. "She's our CEO." There it was. Not surprise. Confirmation. He didn't react. Daniel seemed to study his lack of reaction. "You may not understand what that means," Daniel continued. "I understand enough," he replied. The other man's jaw tightened faintly. "She was en route to a private site inspection when we lost contact." Private site inspection. Helicopters. Executives. It fit. Daniel glanced toward the ridge. "We'll need to retrieve any remaining materials from the crash." He nodded. "There's debris scattered across the slope," he said. "Fuel. Fire damage." Daniel paused. Was there anything else? He knew what that meant. "A bag?" he asked. Daniel's eyes sharpened. "Yes." He held his gaze a moment longer than comfortable. "She asked about it," he said. Daniel didn't smile. "Did you see it?" "No." That was true. Daniel nodded once. "We'll handle it." Of course they would. Behind them, county officials moved past, carrying equipment. The quiet isolation of the ridge was already fractured. Eli stepped out onto the porch behind him. The boy squinted in the early light. "Dad?" He turned. "It's fine," he said. Eli stepped closer and looked at the strangers. Daniel's expression softened slightly when he saw the child. "You must be Eli," he said. The boy stiffened. He hadn't offered that name. Daniel noticed the reaction. "Claire mentioned you," he added calmly. Eli looked up at his father. He didn't say anything. Daniel straightened. "We'd like to thank you properly," he said. "That's not necessary." "It is." He shook his head once. "She needed help. That's it." Daniel studied him again, as if recalibrating. "Ms. Whitmore will likely want to see you," he said. He felt something tighten in his chest. "Why?" Daniel hesitated just a fraction. "She's not accustomed to relying on strangers." The statement carried weight he couldn't fully interpret. "I don't need anything," he said. Daniel inclined his head. "Understood." The conversation felt unfinished, like something still hovered between them. Then Daniel turned and walked back toward the vehicles. The morning grew louder. Search teams climbed the ridge. Drones buzzed faintly overhead. Voices carried across trees that had never heard corporate language before. Eli watched silently. "Is she important?" the boy asked. He considered the question. "Yes." "How important?" He glanced at the black SUV again. "Enough that people fly helicopters for her." Eli absorbed that. "Does that mean she's rich?" "Yes." The boy was quiet for a long moment. "Does being rich make you crash?" He looked down at him. "No." Eli nodded slowly. They stood there until the noise became too much. He led the boy back inside. The cabin felt smaller now. Exposed. He could almost feel the outside world pressing against the walls. By noon, The vehicles had multiplied. One of the search workers approached and informed him they had located the black case. It had been partially burned, but intact. He nodded. He didn't ask what was inside. He didn't want to know. Around mid-afternoon, a call came. The hospital. Claire was awake, asking for him. He stood in the kitchen, holding the phone longer than necessary. Eli watched from the table. "Is it her?" the boy asked. "Yes. Is she okay?" "They said she's stable. Are we going?" He hesitated. This was the part he hadn't planned for. He could step back now. Let her world reclaim her. Return to quiet. He looked at the faint stains still visible on the table. He remembered her voice in the dark. "Don't leave me." "I'll go," he said. Eli's face shifted. "Can I come?" He shook his head. "Not this time." The boy didn't argue. He rarely did. At the hospital, the atmosphere felt different from the night before. More security. More quiet urgency. A man in a suit stood outside her room. He checked his name before letting him in. Inside, Claire sat upright in bed, paler than before, but alert. Her shoulder was bound. Tubes still ran from her side. Her hair was brushed neatly now, composed. Even injured, she carried something controlled around her. When she saw him, her eyes changed slightly, not dramatically, just enough. "You came," she said. Her voice was steadier. "Yes." He stayed near the door at first. She noticed. "You don't have to stand like you're about to leave," she said. He stepped closer, but not all the way to the bed. "They told me about the surgery," he said. She nodded faintly. "Minor." He didn't comment on that. Silence sat between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. "Your son," she said finally. "Ely." "Yes." A small pause. "He stayed." "Yes." Her gaze lowered briefly. He shouldn't have had to see that. He studied her face. "You asked his name." She looked back at him. "I remember." Her voice carried something different now. Not authority. Oriness. Another pause. Then she asked, "Did they find the case?" "Yes." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Good." He didn't ask what was inside. He didn't want to cross into that world. "You saved my life," she said. The sentence landed plainly. He didn't deflect it. "You would have done the same," he said. A faint breath escaped her. "No." He looked at her. She held his gaze steadily. "I wouldn't have," she added. The honesty in that wasn't dramatic. It was matter of fact. That unsettled him more than gratitude would have. "You don't know that," he said. "I do." She shifted slightly, wincing. He instinctively stepped forward. She noticed. A faint, almost invisible smile touched her mouth. "You're not used to being thanked," she said. "I didn't do it for that." "I know." Silence again. Then she asked quietly, "Why did you come back?" He understood the question wasn't about today. It was about the ridge. He didn't answer immediately, because the real answer wasn't simple. He could have said, "Because my son asked if we were going to help you." He could have said, "Because I've seen what happens when people don't come back." Instead, he said, "I couldn't leave you there." She watched him carefully. "You live alone out there," she said. "Yes, on purpose." "Yes." Our gaze didn't leave his face. "Why?" He felt something close down inside him. "That's not your business." She accepted that without offense. "Fair," she said softly. A nurse stepped in briefly to check monitors. When they were alone again, Claire's expression shifted. Less guarded. "I don't remember much after the crash," she said. "Just smoke, heat, and you." He didn't respond. "I remember thinking," she continued slowly, "that you didn't look impressed." He almost frowned. "Impressed? With who I am?" He held her gaze evenly. "I didn't know who you were. That's not what I meant." He understood anyway. She had expected recognition. Deference. Something. She hadn't gotten it. "I saw someone bleeding," he said. "That's all." The room grew quiet again. She studied him in a way that felt less like evaluation and more like curiosity. Your cabin, she said after a moment. It's simple. Yes, it's enough. He nodded once. Her eyes softened faintly. I don't think I've ever been somewhere that quiet. He almost said it wasn't quiet. That silence had its own noise, but he didn't. She looked toward the window. I built things, she said. Companies, systems, expansion plans. Her voice stayed level, and none of that mattered when I couldn't breathe. He didn't comment. She looked back at him. Your son held my hand. Yes. Her eyes flickered briefly. I don't think anyone's done that without wanting something in return. He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't try. A knock interrupted them. Daniel stepped in. We need to review the crash timeline, he said gently. Claire's expression shifted instantly. Professional. Controlled. Yes, she said. Daniel glanced at him. We'll make arrangements to compensate you for. No, he said immediately. Claire's eyes moved to him. It's not necessary, he added. Daniel paused. Claire studied him. Then she said quietly, We'll talk later. He nodded once. He didn't know what that meant. He left the room without looking back. In the hallway, the noise of the hospital returned. Phones, footsteps, movement. He walked out into the late afternoon light. The world outside looked ordinary. Cars passed. People crossed streets. Life continued. He stood there for a moment, feeling the thin thread inside him tighten slightly. He had stepped into her world. Briefly. And she had stepped into his. Briefly. Neither of them fit. He knew that, but something had shifted anyway, and he couldn't undo that now. He didn't tell Eli much when he got home. Just that she was alive. That she was going to recover. That people from her company were handling the crash. Eli listened quietly, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a toy truck in his hands. He rolled it back and forth across the wood, slower than usual. His mind was somewhere else. She asked about me, the boy finally said. He nodded. Eli's brows drew together. Why? He didn't answer. Because he didn't know, or because he didn't want to admit that he did know. Because Claire Whitmore had looked at Eli like he was something unfamiliar, something she hadn't prepared for. Children did that to people. They exposed gaps. The next few days were louder than he wanted. County officials came back twice. Asked about the ridge, about the smoke, about whether he had seen anyone else. He answered patiently, but each question scraped at him, like his life was being opened and inspected. A newsman showed up once. He saw it from the window and didn't even bother going outside. He kept the door locked and pulled the curtains. They left after 20 minutes. But the fact that they came at all made him feel sick. He had spent years keeping his name out of anything public, not because he was hiding from the law, because attention always came with hands attached to it. People wanted pieces of you. Eli asked once if the helicopter had been on TV. He said no, that was a lie. But it kept the boy from asking more. A week later, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a call. A letter. Heavy paper, crisp edges. The kind that smelled faintly of ink and money. No return address, just a logo in the corner. North Star Holdings. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short note. 3 sentences. Formal. Polished. It thanked him for his actions and informed him that a representative would be visiting in person to discuss compensation and future considerations. Future considerations. He read that phrase twice. Then he folded the paper carefully and set it on the table like it might stain the wood. Eli watched from the doorway. What is it? The boy asked. Nothing, he said. Eli didn't believe him, but he didn't argue. The representative arrived 2 days later. Not Daniel this time. A woman. Late 30s. Clean suit. Calm eyes. Hair pulled back tight. She carried a slim leather folder like it was part of her body. She stepped out of a black car parked near the cabin and looked around slowly, taking in the trees, the porch, the quiet. He waited outside. He didn't invite her in immediately. She walked up the steps and offered her hand. "Mr. Hale?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm Marissa Lang, legal counsel for North Star Holdings." He didn't shake her hand. Not out of rudeness, just habit. She didn't seem offended. She withdrew it smoothly. "I'm here on behalf of Ms. Whitmore," she said, "and the board." He leaned against the porch railing. "What do you want?" Marissa's expression stayed polite. "First, to ensure you understand the gravity of what occurred." He stared at her. "I pulled a woman out of wreckage." "Yes," she said, "and that woman is the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation." He didn't react. Marissa continued. "There are sensitive matters involved." He felt his jaw tighten. "About the case," he said. Marissa paused a fraction. "Yes." He looked away briefly toward the trees. He could still picture the black case being dragged from the wreckage, charred on one side but intact. Something that mattered more than her coat, more than her comfort. "Did you find what you needed?" he asked. Marissa nodded. "Yes." The word was calm, but the relief under it wasn't hidden. He looked back at her. "Then leave." Marissa opened the folder. "We're prepared to offer a substantial financial package," she said. "As gratitude, of course, but also to ensure your cooperation and privacy." His eyes narrowed. "You mean silence." "I mean discretion," she corrected smoothly. He let out a short breath through his nose. "You think I was going to call the press?" Marissa studied him. "I don't think you're that kind of man," she said carefully. "But others might be. And the situation is already delicate." Delicate. A helicopter crashed in his forest and dragged the outside world into his front yard, and she called it delicate. He felt irritation rise. Eli appeared behind him on the porch. He hadn't noticed the boy come out. Marissa's gaze shifted to him. Her expression softened slightly. "Hello," she said. Eli didn't answer. He stood close to his father's leg. The man rested a hand lightly on Eli's shoulder. Marissa looked back at him. "Ms. Whitmore insists the offer be accepted," she said. "She believes she owes you." He stared at the folder. "Show me," he said. Marissa handed him the documents. He scanned the numbers. His stomach turned. The amount was more than he'd ever seen written down. It was the kind of money that didn't just solve problems. It created new ones. He handed it back. "No." Marissa's eyes tightened slightly. "Mr. Hale, no," he repeated. Marissa took a breath, as if recalculating her approach. "This could secure your son's future," she said. The man's gaze hardened. "Don't talk about my son." Marissa fell silent. Eli's fingers tightened around his pant leg. The man looked down at the boy, then back at Marissa. "You came here with papers and numbers," he said. "Like you can make this go away. Like you can buy the fact that she was on my table bleeding." Marissa's face stayed composed, but her eyes shifted. He could tell she wasn't used to being spoken to like that. "Ms. Whitmore wants to speak to you directly," she said quietly. He didn't respond. Marissa hesitated. "She's being discharged soon." The word discharged made his chest tighten slightly, though he didn't show it. Marissa closed the folder. "I'll tell her you refused," she said. He nodded. Then, before she could turn away, he added, "If she wants to thank me, she can leave me alone." Marissa paused. She looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. Then she said, "She's not very good at leaving things alone." And she walked back down the steps. The black car disappeared down the dirt road. Silence returned. Eli looked up at him. "Dad," he said. "Yeah." "Is she coming here?" The question hit him in a way he didn't expect. He stared out at the trees. "I don't know," he admitted. Eli nodded slowly, then looked down. "She's scary," the boy whispered. He crouched down so he was eye level with him. "She's not scary," he said. Then paused. "She's just used to being in charge." Eli frowned. "Like a teacher?" He almost smiled, but it didn't fully happen. "Yeah," he said. "Like a teacher." That night he couldn't sleep again. Not because of fear, because his mind kept turning over the same thought. Claire Whitmore wasn't the kind of person who accepted helplessness, and she had been helpless in his arms. That kind of humiliation didn't fade for people like her. It either hardened them or it changed them. He didn't know which one she was. A week passed, then another. The ridge quieted again. The crash site was cleaned. The vehicles stopped coming. The news moved on. He almost started to believe it was over. Then, one afternoon, he heard a car. Not a truck, not the familiar rattle of old engines from town. A smoother sound. A deliberate sound. He stepped outside. A black SUV rolled slowly up the dirt path and stopped near the porch. The door opened. Claire stepped out. She moved carefully, her right arm in a sling beneath her coat. She was thinner than before, paler. But she stood straight, forcing her body to look stronger than it was. Her boots were expensive. Her coat was expensive. But she wore them differently now, like she understood they didn't make her untouchable out here. She looked around at the trees. Then she looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt heavier than conversation. Finally, she said, "You live far from everything." He didn't move. "You shouldn't be here," he replied. Claire's mouth tightened slightly. "I know," she said. Then she glanced toward the cabin door. "And yet, I wanted to see it again." He felt his stomach tighten. Ely appeared behind him, stepping onto the porch. Claire's gaze shifted to the boy. Eli didn't hide this time. He stood still, watching her. Claire's expression softened faintly. "Hello, Eli," she said. The boy blinked, surprised, she remembered. "Hi," Eli said quietly. Claire looked back at the man. "You didn't take the money," she said. He didn't answer. She nodded slowly, as if confirming something. "I don't understand you," she said. He held her gaze. "You're not supposed to." Claire took a step forward, wincing slightly. She hid it quickly, but he saw it. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. She held it out. "This isn't money," she said. He didn't take it. "What is it?" Claire hesitated. Then she said, "An apology." He stared at her. That word didn't fit her. It didn't fit the suit, the SUV, the security driver still sitting behind the wheel watching everything. Claire's eyes stayed steady. "I've spent my life paying people to solve problems," she said, "and I tried to do the same with you." He didn't respond. "I didn't realize," she continued, voice quieter now, "that what you did wasn't something you wanted repaid." Eli looked between them. The man finally took the envelope. He didn't open it yet. Claire watched him. Then she said, "May I come inside?" He hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, because he did, and he didn't like it, because letting her inside meant the boundary was gone. It meant she wasn't just a memory in the woods anymore. It meant she would sit at his table, breathe his air, see the things he kept private. He looked at Eli. The boy's eyes were wide, curious, waiting. The man looked back at Claire. Her face was calm, but her fingers were clenched tightly at her side as if asking this cost her more than she wanted to admit. He stepped aside. 5 minutes, he said. Claire nodded once, and she walked into his home. She paused just inside the doorway, not in hesitation, in observation. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, the shelves, the stove, the worn rug near the table, the child's drawing still pinned to the wall, the faint stain in the wood where her blood had soaked in and never fully left. He watched her notice it. She didn't comment. Ely closed the door behind her and stood near the hallway, studying her openly now. He wasn't afraid this time, just alert. Claire removed her coat carefully, working around the sling. He stepped forward without thinking and took it from her before she dropped it. Their hands brushed for half a second. Her skin felt cooler than he expected. "Thank you," she said. He hung the coat on the back of a chair. "You shouldn't be standing long," he replied. "I've been standing my whole life," she said quietly. I can manage 5 minutes. There was no sharpness in it, just fact. She moved toward the table slowly and ran her fingers lightly across the surface. When they reached the darker mark in the wood, she stopped. That was me, she said. Yes. She kept her hand there a moment longer than necessary, then pulled it back as if she'd touched something private. Eli walked closer. Does it still hurt? He asked. Claire looked down at him. Yes, she answered honestly, but less. He nodded, satisfied. She glanced back at the man. I won't stay long, she said. I came because there are things I didn't say properly. He leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. Say them. She took a slow breath. In my world, she began, people are useful or they're obstacles. That's how decisions get made. Efficiently. Quickly. He didn't react. When I woke up in the hospital, I kept replaying the moment before you pulled me out, she continued. I remember thinking that you were calculating whether I was worth the effort. He frowned slightly. I wasn't. She met his eyes. That's the point. Silence settled between them. Ely climbed into his chair at the table and rested his chin in his hands, listening like this was a story being told for him. Claire continued. I've built my life on control, she said, on never being in a position where I depend on someone who has nothing to gain. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't soften dramatically. But something under it had shifted. You had nothing to gain, she said. He let out a slow breath. I didn't think about gain. I know. She looked around again. I thought I understood what strength was, she added. But strength isn't owning helicopters. The corner of his mouth twitched faintly, almost against his will. No, he said. It's not. Claire's gaze moved to Eli. He carried the stretcher, she said. Yes. Eli looked down, suddenly shy. You didn't have to let him see that, Claire said. He felt something tighten in his chest. He sees life, he replied. I don't hide it from him. Claire absorbed that quietly. In her world, he suspected, life was filtered, managed, shielded from mess. She stepped toward the window and looked out at the trees. I keep thinking about the quiet here, she said. It's not always quiet. No, she said, but it's honest. The word lingered. She turned back toward him. I've made decisions that closed factories, she said calmly. That shifted markets, that affected thousands of families. He studied her face carefully. There was no pride in it, just acknowledgement. I told myself it was necessary, she continued, that efficiency mattered more than discomfort. Eli shifted slightly in his chair but didn't interrupt. Claire's eyes returned to the table. Lying there, she said softly. I realized none of that could make someone come back for me. The room felt smaller. He didn't step forward. He didn't step back. You didn't know who I was, she said. No. And you didn't care. No. A faint exhale left her. I don't know how to process that. He shrugged lightly. You don't need to. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She sat down, slowly, carefully, but fully, at his table. The action felt heavier than her words. Ely watched with wide eyes. Claire rested her good hand flat against the wood. This place, she said quietly, does it survive winter? Yes. Without help? Yes. She nodded. I've been thinking, she said. He felt it immediately, the shift toward something else. What about? He asked. About the ridge. His expression hardened slightly. What about it? The crash wasn't random. He went still. She held his gaze. The inspection I was flying to conduct, it involved land acquisition. He didn't blink. From who? He asked. Claire hesitated. Several parcels, she said carefully. Some owned privately, some by the county. He felt the air change. And this ridge? He asked. It's adjacent. He stared at her. For what? Claire didn't rush her answer. Expansion, she said. A logistics hub. Distribution. He felt his jaw tighten. No. The word came flat. Claire didn't flinch. I didn't know who lived here, she said. It wouldn't have mattered, he replied. Silence. Eli looked between them, sensing something heavier now. Claire's voice stayed calm. I have paused the acquisition, she said. He blinked once. Paused? Yes. For how long? For as long as I choose. He almost laughed. That's not permanent. No, she admitted. He stepped away from the counter and toward the table. So you came here to thank me, he said slowly, and to tell me you might build a distribution center next to my house. Claire's expression tightened. I came here because I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. The honesty in that didn't make it better. It made it worse. Eli's small hands gripped the edge of his chair. Are they going to cut the trees? He asked quietly. Claire looked at him. Yes, she said just as quietly. That was the plan. The boy's face fell. The man felt heat rise in his chest. This is what you do, he said. You fly over places. You decide they're empty. I didn't know you were here. You didn't check. Claire didn't argue. He paced once, then stopped. You're not building here, he said. Claire met his eyes. You don't have the authority to stop it. The words weren't cruel. They were factual. He stepped closer to the table. Maybe not, he said, but you do. Silence stretched. Claire looked at the trees through the window again. Then she looked back at him. I do, she said. The admission felt heavy. Then don't, he said. She studied him. You're asking me to sacrifice millions. I'm asking you to see what's here. Eli stood suddenly. Come outside, the boy said. Both adults looked at him. Ellie walked to the door and opened it without waiting. Come on, he repeated. Claire hesitated, then stood slowly. They stepped outside. The air carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Eli walked to a small clearing near the cabin and pointed. That's where we watch deer, he said. He pointed farther. That's where Dad showed me how to build a fire. He turned in a slow circle. That's our place. Claire followed his gestures carefully. The forest didn't care who she was. It didn't adjust to her presence. It simply stood. Eli looked up at her. If you cut it, he said, where do they go? Claire didn't answer immediately. Her eyes moved slowly across the trees. Then she looked at the man. There was no calculation in her expression now, only conflict. He saw it clearly, the internal shift. Personal promise versus corporate responsibility. He didn't speak. He let the silence press in. Finally, Claire exhaled slowly. I can't make that decision lightly, she said. He nodded. I know, but I can reconsider it fully. Eli stepped closer to her. Please, he said. The word landed softly. Claire looked down at him. Her face changed in a way he hadn't seen before. Less armor, more human. She crouched carefully despite her shoulder and met Eli's eye level. I don't make promises I can't keep, she said. Eli nodded seriously. Okay. She stood again, slower this time. She looked at the man. I need time, she said. He held her gaze. Time is what you almost lost. Her jaw tightened faintly. I know. The wind moved through the trees behind them. No engines, no helicopters. Just the quiet that had existed long before her company did. Claire looked at the ridge one more time. Then she said quietly, I don't want to be the person who erases this. The sentence didn't sound like strategy. It sounded like realization. He studied her face carefully. For the first time, he believed she wasn't just here to close a loop. She was here because something inside her had shifted, and she didn't know how to stand with that yet. She turned back toward the SUV. I'll be in touch, she said. He didn't ask when. He didn't ask how. He just watched her leave. Eli stood beside him, small and steady. Do you think she'll stop it? The boy asked. He stared at the trees. I don't know, he said. And that uncertainty felt heavier than any helicopter ever had. The quiet after she left felt thinner. not broken, just stretched. Eli didn't speak for a while. He wandered toward the edge of the clearing and stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the ridge like he was trying to memorize it. He let him. Inside, the cabin felt altered again, not physically. The same walls, same stove, same uneven floorboard near the sink. But now there was a future hanging over it. Not immediate, not loud, just possible. He picked up the envelope Claire had handed him earlier and finally opened it. Inside wasn't money. It was a single sheet of paper. Typed, not handwritten. A brief statement. It outlined the initial acquisition plan for the surrounding land, environmental impact assessments, projected job creation, infrastructure development. At the bottom, in smaller text, a note, pending executive review. He stared at that line. Pending. It meant she had already intervened. Not stopped it. Not yet. But slowed it. He folded the paper carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Eli came back inside. Dad, he said quietly. Yeah. Why does she get to choose? The question was simple. Honest. He leaned back against the counter. Because she owns the company, he said. That's not fair. No, he agreed. Eli frowned. Then why do people let her? He didn't answer immediately, because that question reached further than trees. Because she built something big, he said finally, and people trust her to decide. Eli looked at the envelope on the table. Do you trust her? The answer didn't come fast. He thought about the crash. The way she had asked about the bag while bleeding. The way she had looked at Eli outside when he pointed at the deer clearing. I don't know yet, he said. That night he walked alone to the edge of the ridge. He needed to see it again. The crash site had been cleared almost completely. Only faint scorch marks remained on the rocks. The forest had already begun its quiet repair. He stood there and tried to imagine machines, bulldozers, concrete, lights that stayed on all night. The thought pressed against his chest. He wasn't naive. He knew towns needed work. That jobs fed families. But he also knew what happened when corporations expanded without knowing what they were stepping on. He had seen that once, years ago. A factory closure in a different town, a different life, promises made and broken. He had moved here after that. Not to hide, to simplify, to keep his son somewhere. Decisions were smaller. He crouched and pressed his palm against the cold ground. If she moved forward with the project, he would fight it. Not with money, not with lawyers, with resistance, public hearings, environmental objections, noise. He didn't want that life again, but he would do it. Because this place wasn't empty. It held his son's first steps without training wheels. It held winter nights when they had sat by the stove and read aloud. It held the quiet that had allowed him to grieve without spectators. He stood up slowly. The next morning, the first sign that things were shifting came from town. At the small grocery store, people looked at him differently. Not hostile, curious. Word had spread. Not about the crash, about the land. Mrs. Alvarez, who ran the store, leaned across the counter. They're saying that company's reconsidering the Ridge project, she said. He kept his voice neutral. So I heard. She nodded slowly. Would have brought jobs, she added. But it would have changed things. He didn't respond. He didn't want to be seen as the man who blocked opportunity. That kind of reputation stuck. When he got home, a second envelope waited on the table. No courier this time. Just placed there. He hadn't heard anyone approach. That unsettled him. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Short. I've called an emergency board review. They're not pleased. I don't know the outcome yet. See. He read it twice. Emergency board review. She had escalated it. He felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, concern. Because people at her level didn't make moves like that without consequence. He imagined her sitting in a room full of executives, investors, people who measured success in quarterly reports, explaining why she wanted to halt a profitable expansion because a boy had pointed at deer. He ran a hand over his face. This wasn't just about trees anymore. It was about her position, her authority. He didn't want to be the reason she lost control of her company, but he also wouldn't accept it destroying his home. 3 days later, she returned. No SUV this time, just a single car, no visible security. She stepped out slowly, still favoring her shoulder. Her expression was different. Tired, not physically, mentally. He walked out to meet her before she reached the porch. They pushed back, she said without greeting. He nodded. I expected that. They think I'm making an emotional decision. Are you? She held his gaze. Yes. The honesty hit harder than strategy would have. They don't like that, she continued. No. She gave a short, humorless breath. They're used to me being decisive. And you aren't. I am, she said. Just not in the direction they want. He studied her face carefully. You could lose support, he said. Yes, you could lose your position. She didn't look away. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Why? He asked finally. She looked toward the trees. Because I can't unsee it, she said. I can't unhear him asking where the deer would go. The wind moved gently through the branches behind them. She swallowed once, and because, she added, quieter, for the first time in years, I made a decision that wasn't based on growth. He felt something in his chest shift slightly. She wasn't asking for praise. She wasn't asking for validation. She was explaining. I don't know who I am without expansion, she said. The sentence landed heavy. He didn't rush to fill it. You're still the person who crawled out of a helicopter wreck, he said finally. She looked at him sharply. You think that's strength? I think surviving without control is. She held that for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I've delayed the project indefinitely, she said. The words settled into the air. Indefinitely. Not permanently. But not scheduled. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They'll revisit it, she added. Of course. But not under me, she said. He went still. You stepped down. She nodded once. I offered my resignation this morning. The forest felt quieter suddenly. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, she replied. I did. He stared at her. You gave up your company. I didn't give it up, she corrected softly. I chose not to let it erase something I didn't understand before. Her voice didn't tremble. It carried weight. He struggled to process it. You built that, he said. Yes. And you walked away? She held his gaze steadily. You ran into a burning wreck for someone you didn't know, she said. We all walk away from something. Silence. Ely stepped outside then, sensing voices. He looked between them. Are they cutting the trees? He asked. Claire knelt carefully again. No, she said. For real? For real. Eli studied her face like he was measuring truth. Then he nodded once. Okay. He ran back toward the clearing without another word. Claire watched him go. You didn't have to resign, he said again, quieter this time. Yes, she repeated. I did. She stood slowly. I built a system that only rewarded expansion, she said. It didn't leave room for restraint. He considered that. And now? Now, she said, I need to figure out who I am without it. She looked around at the cabin, at least for a while. He understood the implication. You can't live here, he said immediately. A faint smile touched her lips. I wasn't planning to. He exhaled slowly. But I might need somewhere quiet, she added. The words hung between them. He felt the weight of that. Letting her visit was one thing. Letting her stay temporarily or otherwise was another. His life had been contained. Predictable. Safe in its simplicity. She had already changed its edges. He looked toward the trees. Toward the ridge. Toward the boy chasing something invisible through the grass. You don't belong here, he said finally. She didn't argue. I know, she replied. Then she added, But I don't think I belong there anymore either. The honesty in that was unsettling. He met her eyes. The air between them felt different now. Less collision, more question. He didn't offer an answer. Not yet, because this wasn't about gratitude anymore. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about trees. It was about what happened after someone gave up the life that defined them, and whether there was room, in a place built on survival and silence, for someone who had just dismantled her own empire. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said carefully, "You can stay for dinner." It wasn't an invitation to a future. It was a small opening. Claire nodded once, and this time, when she stepped toward the cabin, it didn't feel like a boundary breaking. It felt like something uncertain, fragile, but real. She didn't know where to put her hands. He noticed that first. Claire Whitmore, former CEO, the woman who had once directed rooms full of executives without notes, stood in his kitchen looking almost unsure of the space around her. Ely sat at the table, swinging his legs slightly, watching her like she was something new that might disappear if he blinked too long. Dinner was simple. Stew, bread, water. He ladled it into bowls without ceremony. Claire stepped forward automatically. "Can I?" He handed her a spoon before she finished. She took it with her good hand. "Thank you." They sat. No speeches, no long reflections, just the quiet sound of spoons against ceramic. Claire ate slowly at first, careful with her shoulder. Then hunger seemed to override caution. She didn't look embarrassed by it. Eli noticed. "You like it?" he asked. She swallowed. "Yes," she said. "It tastes like something real." He almost smiled at that. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Claire looked at Eli. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The question sounded strange coming from her, like she was trying on a sentence she hadn't used before. Eli thought about it seriously. "A builder," he said. Claire's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Of what?" "Things," he said simply. "Houses, maybe tree houses. Stuff that stays." She nodded slowly. "Stuff that stays," she repeated. Her eyes flicked briefly to the window, to the trees she had almost replaced with steel. After dinner, she insisted on helping clear the table. He almost told her to sit, but he didn't. She moved carefully, wincing once when she lifted a bowl too high. He noticed and took it from her without comment. Their hands brushed again. This time she didn't pull away immediately. Eli slipped outside before dark, chasing the last light. Claire stood at the sink, drying her hands on a towel. "You don't ask for anything," she said quietly. He leaned against the wall. "From who?" "Anyone." He shrugged slightly. "People owe less that way." She studied him. "That's not how the world works. It works fine here." She looked around the cabin again. "It does," she admitted. Silence settled in, comfortable in a way it hadn't been before. "You don't have to stay," he said after a moment. "I know. You could go back. Fight for your position." "I could." He waited. She didn't add more. Instead, she said, "Do you ever regret coming here?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about it honestly. "Sometimes," he said, "when it's too quiet, when winter feels long." She nodded. But it's mine," he said. Her gaze held his. "I don't know what's mine anymore," she said. He didn't respond right away, because that sentence wasn't about land. It was about identity. He stepped closer, not touching her, just reducing the distance. "You're still you," he said. "That's what worries me." He understood that, more than he wanted to. Eli burst back inside then, breathless. "Dad, she should see the creek before it gets dark." Claire looked at him, surprised. "Should I?" she asked. Eli nodded emphatically. He glanced at Claire. "It's a short walk," he said. She hesitated only briefly. "Okay." They walked together through the trees, the light fading slowly into blue. Claire moved carefully but refused help. The creek came into view, a narrow stretch of water winding over smooth stones, reflecting the last of the sky. Eli ran ahead and crouched near the bank. "This is where the deer drink," he said. Claire stepped closer. The water moved steadily, indifferent to everything. She stood very still, listening. "You can hear yourself think here," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. She glanced at him. "I used to fill every quiet moment with noise," she said. "Meetings, calls, data. And now the quiet is loud." He watched her face as she looked at the water. There was no panic in it, just adjustment. Eli skipped a stone across the surface, grinning when it bounced twice. Claire laughed short and surprised, like she hadn't expected the sound to come from her. He looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't armored anymore, still strong, still sharp, but open in places that hadn't existed before. She turned to him. "You don't need me here," she said. The sentence landed differently than before. "No," he agreed. She nodded once. "But I think I need this," she said. He didn't rush to answer. Because this, whatever it was, wasn't about rescue anymore. It wasn't about debt. It was about choice. He stepped closer to the creek. "Staying means letting go of what you were," he said. "I already did. Not fully." She held his gaze. "I'm trying." Eli ran back toward them, holding a smooth stone. "Look," he said, handing it to Claire. She took it carefully. It was flat and gray and ordinary. "Why this one?" she asked. "Because it fits," Eli said. She looked down at the stone in her hand for a long moment. Then she closed her fingers around it gently. When they walked back to the cabin, the night had settled fully. The stars were visible through breaks in the trees. Claire paused on the porch before going inside. "I won't stay forever," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know." She looked at him, something steady in her expression now. "But I don't want to leave because I'm running," she added. He understood that too. For a long time he had stayed here because he was running. From noise, from loss, from expectations. He had told himself it was protection. Maybe it was. Maybe it was also avoidance. They stepped inside. Eli yawned and disappeared down the hallway without being told. Claire stood in the center of the room again. But this time she didn't look like a visitor. She looked like someone standing at a crossroads. He moved closer. "You don't have to become someone else to belong here," he said. She studied his face carefully. "Then what do I have to become?" He thought about that. About the crash. About the boardroom she had walked away from. About the trees still standing outside. "You have to choose it," he said. "Not him. Not the cabin. Not the quiet. Choose it." Her eyes softened. "I am," she said. The air between them felt different now. Not tense. Not fragile. Just honest. He didn't step back. She didn't either. There was no dramatic moment. No sudden rush. Just two people standing close enough to feel the shift. She reached out first. Not for his hand. For his sleeve. Lightly. Testing. He didn't pull away. Her fingers tightened slightly. Then she let go. Not because she doubted, because she didn't need to hold on to prove anything. He understood that. Later, after Eli was asleep and the cabin was quiet again, they sat at the table. No paperwork. No plans. Just water in 2 glasses. "You changed the direction of my life," she said calmly. He shook his head. "You changed it." She considered that. "Yes," she said finally. "I did." Silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It held something steady. Outside, the forest moved gently in the dark. Uncut. Unbroken. Inside, he felt something settle that hadn't been there before. Not rescue. Not obligation. Choice. He looked at her. "You can stay," he said. This time it wasn't just for dinner. Claire held his gaze. "I know," she replied. And for the first time since the helicopter fell out of the sky, the future didn't feel like something crashing toward him. It felt like something being built. Slowly, by hand. She didn't move in the next morning. That surprised him. He woke early out of habit. The sky was still gray-blue when he stepped into the main room. Claire was already awake, sitting at the table with a notebook open in front of her. Not a laptop. Paper. He paused in the doorway, watching. She wasn't writing fast. She was staring at the page like it had argued with her. "You don't look like someone who sleeps late," he said. She glanced up. "I don't," she replied. "My body hasn't adjusted to not having a schedule." He poured coffee into 2 cups without asking and set one in front of her. She accepted it with a small nod. Eli's door creaked open down the hall. "Is she still here?" the boy asked, half asleep. "Yes," Claire answered before he could. Eli walked into the room, hair wild, eyes squinting. He studied her carefully. "You didn't leave?" "No," she said. He nodded once, satisfied. That small exchange carried more weight than either adult acknowledged. After breakfast, Claire stepped outside alone. He watched her from the window. She walked slowly toward the tree line, stopping occasionally as if she was measuring distance, not with a surveyor's eye, but with memory. He stepped out onto the porch. "You're assessing it," he said. She didn't deny it. "I'm unlearning that habit," she replied. He came down the steps and stood beside her. "You can't just stop being who you were," he said. "I know. Then don't pretend." She looked at him. "I'm not pretending." Silence. "I build distribution networks," she said. "I understand supply chains, land value, risk models." He waited. "I don't understand this," she admitted. She gestured toward the trees. "The way he talks about deer like they're neighbors." He almost smiled. "They are." She watched the tree line again. "I thought stopping the project would feel decisive," she said, "like closing a deal. And it feels incomplete." He understood that too, because protecting something wasn't the same as building something. "You're not used to leaving things untouched," he said. "No." A faint breeze moved through the clearing. "I don't want to become someone who only reacts," she said. He studied her face. "You won't," he replied. "How do you know?" "Because you resigned instead of compromising." Her jaw tightened slightly. That might have been reckless. Maybe. She looked at him. "You're not worried?" "About what?" "About me regretting it. About leaving." The question landed carefully. He didn't rush the answer. "If you regret it," he said slowly, "that's yours to carry." She watched him. "And if I leave?" He met her gaze evenly. "Then you leave." There was no accusation in it. No fear. Just truth. Her shoulders lowered slightly. "I don't want to leave," she said. That sentence felt different from the others. Less strategic. More personal. Ely came running toward them with a stick twice his height. "Dad, can we fix the fence by the creek?" He looked at Claire. She didn't hesitate. "Can I help?" she asked. Eli grinned. "Yes." They walked together down to the creek. The fence wasn't much. Just a few wooden posts and wire to guide wandering livestock from neighboring land. Claire knelt awkwardly, adjusting the wire with her good hand, while Eli held the post steady. Her coat got dirt on the sleeve. She didn't brush it off. He watched her carefully, not because he expected her to fail, because he wanted to see if she would stay when it stopped being symbolic. It wasn't symbolic now. It was mud. It was splinters. It was wire cutting into skin. She winced once when the metal snagged her palm. He stepped forward automatically. "I'm fine," she said. He paused, then stepped back. Eli didn't notice the tension. He just held the post proudly. When they finished, the fence stood straighter than before. Eli stepped back, hands on hips. "There," he said. Claire looked at it. "It's not perfect," she observed. "It works," Eli replied. She considered that, then nodded. "It works." They walked back slowly. Halfway to the cabin, Claire stopped. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Eli had run ahead. He turned toward her. "The board accepted my resignation," she said. He didn't react immediately. I'm no longer CEO. The words didn't carry drama, just fact. And they're reinstating the Ridge Project under new leadership. His jaw tightened. But, she continued quickly, it will take months. Environmental reviews, financing shifts. And you? I have no official authority to stop it anymore. The forest felt still around them. She held his gaze. But I still have influence, she added. Relationships, investors who trust me. He waited. I'm starting something smaller, she said. A foundation focused on sustainable rural development. He studied her expression. Not expansion, no. Preservation, balance, she corrected. The word sat carefully between them. You're building again, he said. Yes. But differently. Yes. He let that settle. And the ridge? He asked. I can't promise it's safe forever, she said honestly. But I can promise it won't be erased quietly. He respected that answer more than reassurance. Ely's voice called from the porch. Come on. Claire glanced toward the cabin. You don't owe me this fight, he said. She looked back at him. It's not your fight, she replied. It's mine now. They stood there for a moment longer. The air felt clearer than it had weeks ago. Not because the future was certain, because it wasn't being ignored. When they returned to the porch, Eli held up 2 sticks. Swords, he declared. Claire accepted one with a raised eyebrow. You're at a disadvantage, she told him, lifting her sling slightly. Eli grinned. I'll go easy. He watched them circle clumsily in the clearing. Claire laughed again, freer this time. Not the restrained laugh from the creek. Something less guarded. He felt something inside him shift quietly. Not relief, not triumph, just alignment. Weeks passed. Claire didn't move into the cabin permanently. She rented a small house in town. She came often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes to walk the ridge alone, sometimes to sit at the table with Eli while he drew plans for tree houses that leaned impossibly into the sky. She never spoke about boardrooms unless asked. And when she did, the stories sounded different. Less like victories, more like lessons. One afternoon, months later, a letter arrived from the county. The Ridge Project had been officially withdrawn. Insufficient environmental clearance. Investor redirection. He read it twice. Then handed it to Claire without a word. She scanned it, her shoulders lowered slowly. It's done, she said. He nodded once. No celebration. No dramatic embrace. Just quiet acknowledgement. Eli burst out of the cabin when he heard. They're not cutting it, he asked. No, Claire said. For real. For real. Eli threw his arms around her waist without hesitation. She froze for half a second still, not fully accustomed to sudden affection, then wrapped her good arm around him carefully. He watched that. The way she held on. Not like someone clinging, like someone grounding herself. Later, when Eli had run off again, she stood beside him at the edge of the clearing. You were right, she said. About what? That strength is an ownership. He looked at her. It's choice. She nodded. I thought losing my position would break something in me, she said. It didn't. He studied her face. What did it break? She considered that. Fear, she said. Silence settled comfortably between them. You're different, he said quietly. Yes. So are you. He didn't deny it, because she was right. He had spent years guarding his life like something fragile. Claire's arrival had forced him to open it first in urgency, then in uncertainty, and finally in willingness. He hadn't planned to let someone in again. He hadn't planned for his son to trust someone so quickly. He hadn't planned for love to look like shared silence instead of rescue. Claire stepped closer, not dramatic, not urgent, just close. You didn't need me, she said. No. But you let me stay. Yes. Her eyes held his. That changed me more than the crash did. He believed that. He reached for her hand this time. Not to steady her, not to save her, just to hold it. She didn't hesitate. The forest stood around them unchanged. The ridge remained intact. The cabin still small. Life still simple. But something inside him had shifted permanently. He no longer saw the outside world as something that only threatened, and she no longer saw land as something that only expanded. They had both stepped into something they hadn't planned, and chosen it anyway. Not because it was easy, because it was honest. He looked at her one last time before they walked back toward the cabin. The helicopter had fallen out of the sky months ago. The sound of it still lived somewhere in his memory. But it no longer felt like impact. It felt like the moment before something broke open. And what broke open wasn't the forest. It was them. Not shattered. Changed. They walked back together. Not rescued. Not indebted. Just choosing. And this time it wasn't about survival. It was about staying.